Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Minsky, Executive Director of Progressive Democrats of America. And what's up next is a town hall that we had just a few days ago about the need for tuition-free public college in the United States of America and in the great state of California.
Hi, my name is Dave Wright. I'm the chair for the Santiago chapter of the Progressive Dems of America California branch, and also the Progressive Dems of America. We wear two caps in our chapters here in California, so we represent both. I'm happy to have everybody here, see everybody here, and I'm hoping that we're all products of public education, higher education, and that we want to make sure that we make education available to everybody here in the state of California and throughout the nation. I'm going to now pass the baton to Mike Thaler, who is our host, and he gets to be, he's going to set the ground rules for how we're going to operate the meeting, and then when he's done, he'll pass it back to Alan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David. I'm Mike Thaler. I am the president of PDA-CA and former chair of the Progressive Caucus of the California Democratic Party. So that's my introduction, and I will pass it now on to Alan Minsky.
Well, thank you so much, Mike Thaler. And we are here to talk about building a movement for and supporting the policy of tuition-free higher education, public higher education in California and as well as across the country. I'm going to be elaborating a little bit on that theme momentarily. Again, earlier on, I let people know that we'll be hearing from, in just a moment, even before I offer my thoughts on the subject, to Eloise Reyes, the majority leader of the state assembly, who has pre-recorded a message to everybody. And then we'll hear from the primary presenter, Christopher Newfield, emeritus professor from University of California, Santa Barbara, and the co-author of something called the $66 Fix, which is a central focus of this meeting. Very much a central focus of the meeting, because this is a proposal that basically makes the case that California can return not just to tuition-free higher education, but achieving what was the master plan for education in California in the 1960s, when tuition at the University of California system, the Cal State, and the community colleges was organized to be free for all the people who attended it. Obviously, this is a way in which the whole crisis of student debt can be avoided, and we'll talk about the details of that in particular. Commenting on Professor Newfield's presentation will be Professor Wendy Brown from University of California, Berkeley. And following from that, we're going to hear from Professor Charles Toombs, who is at San Diego State University, who's with the California Faculty Association. We'll also hear from Professor Stephen Filling from Cal State Stanislaus, who is with the Association of American University Professors, AAUP. I may have gotten that backwards on the two A's. We are also planning to hear from Emmeline Bennett from Young Democratic Socialists of America. And then we have a surprise guest. We have another assembly person. We have Assembly Member Miguel Santiago, who is going to join us at the top of the hour. As Mike said, we have over 300 RSVPs for this event. As for events taking place Sunday at 4 p.m., as you can see, we aren't quite up to 300 people, but we certainly will be sharing the recording with all the people who RSVP'd, as well as to the complete lists of PDA National and PDA California. So we should be able to get this recording out to many tens of thousands of people in California and across the country. I also want to give a shout out right at the top too. First of all, to Our Revolution. I know a representative from the organization is here as well amongst us, and also to two people who I think are going to be joining us and maybe commenting later on. Derek Marshall, who is running for Progressive, who is running for the U.S. House of Representatives in California 8, and Angelica Duenas, who ran for the Congress for the House of Representatives in District 29 in California, two great progressives, and we might hear from them later as well. But right now, I'd like to share my screen and have everybody hear how do I get to this now so I can share the screen with Eloise Reyes? Hold on here. Open this file. There we go.
Thank you to Progressive Democrats of America for inviting me to participate in this important town hall to discuss the costs of higher education and the need to achieve tuition-free education. I wish I could be there with you virtually, but I'm thankful that I can provide this video message. We all know the value of higher education and the doors that it can open for our young people and the doors that it has opened for most of us here today. Particularly for our communities of color, education is a pathway to not only improving oneself, but a pathway to uplift an entire community. Higher education should always be an opportunity and not a burden. College attendance should not lead to long-term and in some cases crushing debt. Since the 1970s, college tuition has increased at 8 times the rate of wage growth. Couple this with the reality that a 4-year degree has become the minimum achievement that someone needs to have a career with a living wage. And you can see that this system is weighing down our young people with debt for years and sometimes decades. Studies show that nearly a third of bankruptcy filers had student loan debt, and that debt made up nearly half of their total debt. Sadly, we also hear stories that some young people debate whether to attend college due to the long-term costs. This should never be a decision that a young person has to make, nor should the pursuit of knowledge and a career lead someone into a debt trap. The average student debt in California for public 4-year college is over $21,000, and nationally it's over $27,000. Plus parents are taking out loans averaging $37,000. An important statistic is that our students owe over $1.7 trillion in student loan debt, while all credit card debt in the U.S. is just under $1 trillion. Our students come out of college unable to buy a home, start a family, or go on vacation because they must immediately begin to pay off their college debt. They say an education is the greatest equalizer, but at what cost? For the older generations, we remember less debt and more opportunities. Our younger students are buckling under the weight of student loan debt, and we must do something about it. First, we need to get people talking about it. Second, we need policymakers doing something about it. The good news is that through your advocacy and tireless work on this issue, the discussion on the cost of higher education is now at the forefront of education policy discussions. What was once viewed as an insurmountable problem is now on the minds of policymakers and stakeholders. Even many colleges and university faculty and administration officials have acknowledged the seriousness of this problem. In California, we've already made some progress in this effort as we established, and I'm proud to have supported in the State Assembly, the California Promise Program, which provides 2 years of free community college education for first-time students. I'm also happy to share that since being elected in 2016, during my time in the legislature, we have pushed in both the Assembly and Senate to expand opportunities to low-income and moderate-income students through the expansion of the Cal Grant and middle-class scholarship program. This doesn't mean that we are finished with our work to lower the costs of college education in California, but it does demonstrate that with the right effort, we can continue to make progress on these issues. With your help and efforts to bring people together like this town hall, you are making a difference and pushing us further down the path to equality and affordable education. It is through our shared vision, our shared work, and our commitment to do what is right for our young people that I know we will change outcomes for future generations. It's our responsibility. And I know that we will move closer to providing that quality higher education for our students without overburdening them with student loan debt. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to provide this video message, and I look forward to the future when we can all be together in person.
Thank you. And that was, again, Majority Leader of the California State Assembly, Eloise Reyes. And I should mention, of course, that Eloise Reyes represents the 47th district in the Inland Empire here in Southern California. I also should mention that later on, I forgot to mention earlier, we'll be hearing from Senator John Laird, who is from the 17th Senate District in the state of California. And he is also the chair of the Senate Subcommittee on Education. Now, before I introduce Christopher Newfield, I do want to talk about the $66 fix. And you can find out all about this at the website 66fix.org. Now, the $66 fix is named that because that is the price tag for the median California family to reclaim the higher education that California once had and that it can have again. Again, the price tag for the median California household, meaning 50% of the households will pay $66 or less. 50% of the California households will pay $66 or more. For 75% of California households, the bill is only $180 a year. And again, at that incredibly low cost per household, you will have free tuition at the community college level, the California state universities, and in the University of California system. Now, I highly recommend this website. It really takes you, even just on the front page of the website, just through all of the basic information that I feel you really need to know as to why it is essential that we support this as public policy that should be adopted, passed through the California legislatures, and signed by the governor. And it is a college degree without the debt, as it is headlined on the $66 website. It says it is the $66 fix is a carefully researched report that proves that California can afford to restore top quality public higher education and make the system 100% tuition free. It is built upon the 1960 Master Plan, California's three-segment public system of higher education, the community colleges, the California State University system, and the University of California system, was for decades the opportunity and growth blueprint for California's prosperity. The site shows how spending per student has declined precipitously in the 21st century, how the tuition has increased, and the debt load for students coming out of the University of California and Cal State systems has skyrocketed. It shows, again, very succinctly and very clearly that over the last 15 years, California's political leaders have taken $57 billion in public investment away from higher education. Again, this is what we're all looking to reverse as a progressive political priority, as a priority for everybody in the state and the welfare of everyone in California and society at large. There's been drastic cuts to the spending per student at Cal States and the UCs. There have been soaring tuition, exploding student debt, and voters understand that higher education is one of the highest priorities. So it polls tremendously well. This is a very popular plan with the general California public. And it advocates for just 4 simple steps to restore top quality public higher education to every qualified California student. Number 1, make colleges and universities 100% tuition free, as the 1960 Master Plan intended, eliminating almost all student debt. Number 2, return per student funding for Cal State and the UCs to where it was in 2000, adjusted for inflation. Number 3, ensure there's an opportunity to attend a public university or college or university for every student ready and willing to do the work, just like California generations before them. Okay. And number 4, send K through 14 schools their Prop 98 share of dollars to help prepare more California kids for college. And again, a few years back, this was called the $48 fix. After Prop 98, 30% of all funding that is allocated to higher education must also be allocated to K through 14, as it's called here. And that means it's now the $66 fix. So just $18 more for the median household. And again, this is all on the website, spelled out very, very clearly, with just a little bit of elaboration as to why this is such a tremendous social good, which it is. It's all on the website, $66fix.org, or actually more simply, 66fix.org. So to talk more about the $66 fix, I'm now honored to introduce Professor Christopher Newfield. He is a professor emeritus professor at UC Santa Barbara in the English department. and he is the co-author of he's the author of many books and the co-author of the $66 Fix.
Thanks, Alan. I'm just going to pull this stuff up. The important thing about this is that what's really brilliant about the $66 Fix is that it gets these two things, quality and affordability, together. The model that we have now is that basically you have to choose. You can get quality if you're willing to pay an enormous amount of money, which most people can't afford. Or you can get affordability, but it's watered down in terms of resources because there isn't enough money coming in. We actually, we had a solution to this, which is essentially public or social funding of what we consider to be social goods, which means that you could have really great quality and not put the burden on the individual person who is getting the education. What the $66 Fix does is not actually something particularly radical, but something that is normal, sort of outside of the neoliberal context that we've grown up in, and that is to combine these two things. So let me just run through some of the essential elements of this. The genius of the $66 Fix is to do these things. It solves both problems at the same time. It cuts tuition to zero, so it eliminates the source of the student debt crisis, the primary source, which is that so much of financial aid is going to tuition. If tuition is zero, you can move financial aid instead to costs of attendance, room and board, et cetera. And it also replaces the money that universities are rightly afraid of losing to free college with public funding. It addresses all of the segments at the same time, and it helps universities and students at the same time. And one of the terrible things about the funding model that we've been sucked into with this, with so much of the cost being privatized, moved from the society into the individual's responsibility, is that there's a zero-sum game. If the universities are going to get more money, then students are going to have to pay more and have more debt. If students have it more affordable, then universities have less money. This allows both to benefit. And then finally, and this is something that is particularly important to me as someone who is in the classroom for decades, it provides sufficient educational resources to the classrooms and the laboratories of public universities so that they can help educate students to the level of cognitive and social abilities that we're going to need to face the challenges of the 21st century, which are going to be worse than anything that we faced before. So it basically funds education for the next society, not the last one. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Okay, here's a table that I'm not going to walk you through, but it gives you a basic sense of the calculations that went behind the $66 Fix. It takes all of the tuition revenue back to zero for all three segments. It puts that funding amount into the state, and it's much larger revenue sources than those of the individual students that are paying, so that it allows not just tuition to go to zero, but for the university systems in California to have the same amount of money per student in 2021, 2022, as they had in inflation-adjusted dollars in 2000 and 2001. The reason that this is important is that as students have been paying more, universities have actually been giving them less. They've had UC and Cal State have had less total resources per student to spend on education and on research, even as students have been paying more for those fewer dollars. So this flips that entire thing on its head and fixes both problems at once. And it costs the median taxpayer $66. So it's so cheap, it's sort of like, why aren't we doing this already? And that's, I think, the basic way to think about this. Okay, there are a couple of philosophical issues that there's a lot of confusion about, and that I think has disrupted what might ordinarily just be a fairly clean political trajectory towards the much more efficient tax funding of higher education as opposed to the inefficient tuition funding of higher education. And that is the idea that higher education is kind of a private benefit. It's your personal money. You get a higher wage, and that's the main reason that anybody goes to college. And society as a whole benefits only marginally. This, I think, was lying behind the somewhat startling experience that many of us had when we were watching President Joe Biden's town hall in Cleveland last week, where he was asked by someone in the audience whether he would support the proposal to eliminate the first $50,000 of student debt for everybody that holds student debt in the United States. And he said rather bluntly, I will not make that happen. It was the most point blank refusal that I can remember from Biden, at least since he's been inaugurated. And then he shifted to a related but non-identical issue, which is community college. He said everybody should be able to go to community college for free. That costs $9 billion and we should pay for it. And what I thought when I was watching him is that, well, this is a guy who still sees bachelor's degrees as optional and personal. In other words, it's something that you do if you're sort of middle class or upper middle class. It doesn't really benefit society in the same way that community college benefits them. And I think that that is fundamentally misguided. That a bachelor's degree and like associate's degrees have social benefits that society as a whole is obligated to pay for. And that having shoved those social benefits, which are expensive, onto individuals has caused the crisis that we're in. Another example from California itself, Gavin Newsom in his Department of Finance's sort of cover statement for his budget proposal in 2019 said, higher education is about meeting workforce needs, which are ever changing. So, you know, he does know that they're not going to be the same in 2030 as they are today, but it's essentially about economic mobility. It's about increasing wages. It's about the good society defined as people being able to make more money next year than they were making before, making more money out of college than they were making coming out of high school. It's a very limited understanding of benefits, the social benefits. And it's also about the changing student population. So he's aware that he needs to do something for a minority majority population that has been underserved by the higher education sector because it has become too expensive for the population that we actually have, but it's still very narrowly focused on monetary benefits. Though there's a pretty easy way of visualizing this that I'm going to run through very quickly. It's a economist chart. It's kind of 2 rows, 2 columns. They use the word pecuniary, which is not that friendly, but it's pretty easy once you use it a few times. The top row here are pecuniary or monetary benefits, private and public or external. There are then non-pecuniary benefits, which are also both private and external. And what we've done, partly in order to justify charging people privately for higher education, as opposed to what we do with high school, is we said, well, really the main thing that you're getting out of college is this private pecuniary benefit, higher wages, et cetera. And what we've done is we've focused on that is we've basically obliterated the other 3 types of goods, which if you add them all up are actually a larger share of the total benefits of higher education than the private wage benefit, which is basically the only thing that we ever talk about. So if you do a proper chart, what you see is all this other stuff. You see personal psychological benefits, deep cognitive learning and cognitive capabilities that are developed that go beyond what you can actually use in the workplace, that benefit society, that benefit your family, that benefit your experience of life itself. And then there are 2 different types of social benefits, both productivity for companies, but more fundamentally, the possibility of having a democratic society that can solve its problems not through coercion and violence, but through deliberation, through cross-racial, non-exploitative forms of collaboration. So there's a lot of things to be said about this, but bear in mind that the higher education benefits are as social and non-monetary as they are fixable in that one quadrant, and therefore society should be funding them. The other thing that I want to say is that one of the main things that people do when they go to university is develop their abilities to contribute to and build the future, right? So they're building their own personal futures. I want to do these things with my life, but they're also building capabilities for contributing to a better future for the planet, for their society, for people in general. And so, you know, it's pretty easy to get mired in extrapolating from what we have now to the future, just assuming the future is going to be more of this, and also to thinking about the future as not only more of this, but more of sort of the worst aspects of this. And a way that you can visualize that if you're doing sort of possible futures in a future study sense is just to say, well, all the futures are basically business as usual, and they're mostly bad, right? There's the rise of the robots, going to be programmed. There's the death of democracy and its subsidence into oligarchy. There's the economy turning into monopoly, and there's the climate crisis, which is just going to produce social disorder of every kind. The way that I think about higher education benefits and sort of future extrapolations is not by thinking about trends or drivers as all moving in one direction, but thinking about them as uncertainties and counterintuitive possibilities that higher education exists in order to help us develop positively. So the two that are perhaps most relevant for the discussion here are, and I'm just doing these in terms of those axes, is programming, the rise of algorithms, the rise of robots. Is it actually going to reduce the need for us to do non-routine things and just tell us what to do? Or is it counterintuitively going to actually increase the population's need to have non-routine, complex, sophisticated, interpretive, hermeneutical skills? And then for the other axis, is oligarchy really going to succeed, or is it going to die? Has it already peaked? Are we about to see a new wave of democratization? If you map this out, what you get are very different possible worlds from the movie you've either seen or heard about, where platforms and programmability produce essentially just a kind of a robot control society. Amazon and Schumpeter, I won't go into what those are, but you can get different combinations of these things. The one that I think that we need to see higher education as fundamentally connected to is a world in which, because of the investment in a full range of skills in students and in researchers, we get a complementarity between higher capabilities on this axis and more democratic interactions on this one. So we don't get Amazon, we get the culture, which is an allusion to the Ian Banks series, in which abundance is possible, democracy is possible, and the challenge is developing a range of skills that allow people to deal with this. Okay, so what's the connection between getting something like this positive upper right-hand world over the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, and what we need to actually fund in higher education today and fund at scale in the public sector, not just have it at Stanford and at Duke and at Pomona and at Reed, but have it at Cal State Northridge and have it at Danza College and have it at UC Riverside, the same way that it is in those other schools. We need money to give 100% of the student population, not just the 2.5 that go to premium places. All of this stuff. We need research and learning to happen in combination, which involves customized, individualized learning for people with all of the range of interests and skills that they have already. We need mentorships that are continuous over time, so personal relations with professors, with graduate students, that don't just start and stop with this constant kaleidoscope of part-time people. We need students being in contact with professors and graduate students and their peers that are producing knowledge and not simply learning how to more efficiently consume it. We need to have institutions that are creating knowledge all the time. It's just part of what ordinarily goes on in laboratories and libraries and in the classroom, which always requires institutional funds to pay for it. It's not sponsors that pay for the full cost of that. It's universities that have to do it. Complex staff that allow all this to happen, both in terms of administrative support, but also student support and personnel support. Facilities have to be developed. And bundling multiple upgrades of different dimensions of the university together, all of which costs quite a bit of money, allows this kind of amazing thing to happen, which is easy to put in a PowerPoint line, but which is hard to actually achieve. And that is quality for everybody, 100% of the student population, not only getting a credential and leaving, but getting a credential whose process has allowed them to develop to the fullest extent analysis, interpretation, invention, and creativity to solve the kinds of problems, technical and non-technical and cultural, that they're the most interested in solving. Okay, so on one level, this seems completely obvious, like, aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing this? Well, the answer is we generally want it. Students certainly want it, my experience. I mean, the people who are involved on the front line of this process are passionately devoted to making this happen for themselves. And we haven't been willing to pay for it as a society. Society that tried to shift the cost onto a generation that is less able to pay individually than the generations that have preceded it. So here's what that looks like nationally. The country has cut its state investment by about 20% over the last 25 years. We're supposed to be the greatest knowledge society on the planet. Instead, we're pulling resources out of the production of knowledge and the capabilities that allow its use. We've doubled the net tuition for students, that's the green bar, and we've had a predictable effect, which is that instead of seeing more and more people getting bachelor's degrees, we see a flatlining of it after the financial crisis through this whole decade. Well, what about California? You may think that, well, we're the leading knowledge society. We must be doing better than the average. In fact, we're doing really very badly in terms of the aggregate funding per student. You think, well, I'm looking for California up here, and instead I'm seeing Alaska and Delaware and Wyoming and Illinois. When I look for California, I see Florida and Louisiana and Washington, and there's California, third from the bottom in terms of the total resources per student that are being brought to bear. It's a clear case of underinvestment. There's also a clear correlation between the decline in taxpayer funding for institutions, public institutions, and the decline of the white share of the student population of those institutions. Here's a slide that I made for the University of California, which is really pretty startling. Over the last 20 years, the share of state personal income that was being sent to UC fell, except for when it fell faster because of the financial crisis, more or less at the same rate as the declining share of the white population. So it's a kind of a textbook example of structural racism. It's not something that the folks that are doing this budget cutting consciously intend, but it is nonetheless the clear systemic effect of what they've been doing, which is that a student body of color is paying more out of its own pocket for a less well-funded education than was the case for white students of the generation before. Okay, so let me just pull this together in a few final points. The first one of these is that the model that we have now, if it were sort of working, you'd say, well, why do we really want to, reinvent the wheel? It's not working. It's completely broken. It doesn't work for universities. It also doesn't work for students. It reinforces structural racism. It increases economic inequality. Universities have become, during this period of privatization of the funding model, engines of inequality rather than the engines of equality that they were intended to be. It's not working for students. It's not working for universities. It's not working for teaching staff. Who is it working for? The only people that it's working for are basically taxpayers who don't have anybody involved in the educational system and who are more or less free riding on the social benefits that they are assuming that other people are going to pay for. The $66 fix fixes this. It fixes it for students, allowing financial aid to cover their cost of attendance rather than covering tuition. It will make debt-free graduation a possibility. It fixes universities' revenue crises, which they've had for the last 20 years. And it will benefit society by allowing people to go into the areas that they are most interested in and most able to make a meaningful contribution in, because they are not being steered into stuff that they don't actually like by a debt burden that they want to work off in a high-paying, but in some cases unattractive career. And then finally, and this is really the last point, the really good future depends on social funding of what are shared benefits. It's not about private income primarily. That's a little piece of this. It's about social development, and it's about economic advancement for the entirety of the population. So the last thing I would say is really that the really good future that we can imagine for ourselves depends on higher education budget justice, funding it properly, publicly, and socially in the way that is eminently affordable to do. Thanks.
Okay. Christopher Newfield is a distinguished professor emeritus in the English department at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and is currently the director of research at the Independent Social Research Foundation. Christopher is the author of Unmaking the Public University, The 40-Year Assault on the Middle Class, as well as The Great Mistake, How We Wrecked Public Universities and How We Can Fix Them. He blogs at Remaking the University. His Twitter handle is at CNEWF, CNEWF, and he is the co-author of the $66 Fix Quality Affordable Education. He now lives in London, and that's where I spoke to him yesterday. And I did speak to him further, and I'm going to now show you the follow-up question that I asked to Christopher Newfield momentarily, as I get the screen back up. And I apologize for the clunkiness of all this, but share sound is on. And here is my follow-up question with Chris Newfield. Chris, thank you for that amazing presentation. I just have one follow-up question, which has to do with California, California society, American politics, and global society. It's my sense that California, and you talked about the relationship of the diversity of the population in California and the decline in investment in higher education, that California is now and is becoming ever more so the most diverse, large region of the world in human history. And we are in an era in which there is a rise of ethno-nationalist right-wing reaction. And California, as such, has an opportunity to really present itself as the rejoinder to that rise of right-wing ethno-nationalism around the world. And also at the same time in American politics, California is always spoken of as sort of being a trendsetter, a decade ahead of everything. Unfortunately, in the 1960s, defying people's expectation at the time, it actually became the place where the right-wing reaction came out of. The Reagan reaction spread from California across the country. Now we have a situation where you have a very democratic state, but we have a California Democratic Party that, while it is, some people hope, progressives and Democrats, that it will be the trend that will spread across the country, really hasn't established anything that defines itself as a socially transformative political formation. I think that what you're proposing is exactly that, for something to anchor a socially transformative 21st century progressive politics. And I'd just like to hear your thoughts about that and how we can advocate best for that to the California population.
Oh, I think the population understands it, but I think you're right that the Democratic Party is behind the curve on this. And I think the Democratic Party is actually split. You know, it's a business Democratic Party that runs the state, and it's very connected to Silicon Valley, to tech, to the entertainment industry. Silicon Valley is more interested in platform economy than it is in the social goods economy. So it doesn't really see why it needs to pay taxes in order to allow people other than itself to make fundamental social decisions when, you know, it has this opportunity to do social engineering on its own. So I think that's an argument that really has to happen at the sort of the party policy level, which I'm not part of. In terms of the public, polls have shown for 10 years that they think college is too expensive, tuition is terrible, the state isn't giving enough money to universities, that the university is essential not just for a good job, but for a good life in the ways that we were just talking about. The Latinx population has higher shares of parents insisting that their students or their children graduate from college, be students, than is the case for the white population. So there's pent-up demand for affordable quality. And I don't think we really have to sell it to the public so much as we need to get the party behind it.
Thank you so much, Professor Christopher Newfield, for a great presentation, and thank you for all your work.
Thanks, Alan. I really appreciate you covering this.
So that was again Professor Christopher Newfield, and to comment on Christopher's presentation, we now have Wendy Brown with us. Wendy Brown is a professor at University California, Berkeley in political science. She is also a core faculty member in the program for critical theory at the University of California, Berkeley. And she is the author, most recently, of a fantastic book I recommend to everybody, In the Ruins of Neoliberalism, The Rise of Anti-Democratic Politics in the West. Wendy Brown, welcome.
It's wonderful to be here. Let's move because I'm aware that there's a big program and it's a beautiful afternoon. So first of all, thanks all for organizing this. And what I want to do is just move a little more deeply into the main theme of Chris's talk, which is why the $66 fix importantly mixes the question of quality with the question of accessibility and why that's so important. And then I want to address something that I think has already come up in the chat quite a bit, which is why do this at the state level? Why not do it at the national level? So I'll talk for about 10 minutes and try to hit both of those in some depth. So the rationale for the $66 fix is that an educated population is a public good. And that means simply that higher education does not just enhance the individual, it supports democracy, it supports social equality, and above all, it builds in its constituency an appreciation of the problems that now face the world and our capacities to help solve them. An uneducated population is a disaster for all of these things. Now, this idea that this is why higher education is a public good was common sense for the decades that the California Master Plan reigned. Starting in the 1960s, that master plan guaranteed free higher education to all Californians through three different segments: the community college system, the state college system, and the University of California. We only began to dismantle the master plan in the past 35 years. Yes, this was right as white people were becoming a minority in the state and populations of color were increasingly seeking higher education in larger numbers. But it also followed widespread campus political protests that then Governor Ronald Reagan was advised to contain by imposing tuition. Why? Because tuition, his advisors told him, would keep students submissive to the authority of the families that were paying for it. So it was a very explicit project of containing both political protest and privatizing higher education. Now, of course, the privatization process continued as privatizing all public goods became normal across the political spectrum, the phenomenon we now call neoliberalism. This normalization has robbed tax-supported higher education of its mainstream footing. A mainstream footing, I'm trying to underscore, was really present until these last 30, 35 years. And that loss of mainstream footing, I think, is indexed beautifully by the fact that my otherwise progressive chancellor at Berkeley, always in favor of inclusion and diversity and equity and everything else, routinely deprecates the very idea of free college as what she calls a dangerous idea. Dangerous because it implies education costs nothing. Now, it's strange reasoning because, of course, that's not how we view K-12 education or public infrastructure like roads or firefighters or police or, alas, prisons. And it's important to remember that an incarcerated individual in California costs the state approximately $90,000 a year, more than 3 times what a fully supported college student costs. So our task is not just to explain why privatizing education has been a disaster. It's degraded the quality and intensified the inequality in higher education at every level. Our task is to explain over and over again and build support for the notion that higher education supports healthy democratic commons and a livable future, what Chris mentioned. It does not simply support individual income prospects. Now, why support the California $66 fix? Why not just support a national free college for all program? To get there, I want to take a minute to compare progressive demands on healthcare and college, Medicare for all and college for all. Medicare for all. The aim is pretty simple. Everyone gets access to healthcare. No one bears the cost individually. No one has to struggle with insurers about coverage. Healthcare provision itself would not have to change radically, just as it doesn't change when you age into Medicare now. What changes is who pays for it. A government reimbursement system rather than hundreds of profit-extracting insurance companies. What changes is that everyone gets access to quality healthcare, and what assures that quality are the health professions themselves. The demand for free college is very, very different. It involves many levels and many kinds of education, serving many different constituencies and aims. From the trade and vocational skills offered primarily in community colleges, but also the state college system, to bachelor's degrees in state colleges and UCs, to PhDs and MDs and JDs offered in research universities. Moreover, in the United States, and this is a key point, public education has been and continues to be organized and funded primarily by individual states. And the funding and quality varies hugely across them. Compare the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa with the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. It also varies within state systems themselves. Compare UCLA with the funding and budget of UC Merced. Now, what we want is not to wreck the quality at the top, but rather to make it more accessible and close the gaps between parts of these systems that are starving and overcrowded and parts of them that are thriving. In other words, we want to level up, not down. But how do we get there? In healthcare, if we shifted to single payer next year, we could increase access to healthcare for millions of Americans and slice into massive corporate profits. We'd eliminate the health insurance industry, the private health insurance industry, all its go-betweens, all its lawyers, and we would cage the private hospital industry and big pharma. This would save billions in the current costs of Medicaid and Medicare, even while those programs were expanded. But if we were to shift to tuition-free public higher education without something like the $66 fix, other than some stupid outsourcing boondoggles, there's not much corporate profit to hack into in universities. Rather, it's pure cost. And the danger is that cutting this cost would be accompanied by cutting quality. Likely, if we did something like free college without something like the $66 fix, there would be a press for more and more large online courses, ever-growing use of cheap, unprotected, exploited adjuncts, compressing college itself from 4 to 3 to maybe 2.5 years, and above all, focusing entirely on streamlining the curriculum so that it was about career-ready degrees, not the public good of an educated democracy, but rather cutting deep into whatever doesn't comport with the cheapest way to deliver education, to deliver job-ready students. In short, the danger is that as higher education is made more broadly accessible, free college without supplemental funding would lead to degrading all college into the most streamlined, cheapened vocational education. It would be shorn of everything that it can offer right now to empower individuals, enrich democracies, and of course, build a livable future for the planet. In short, it would mean cutting deep into, if not eliminating, the education students now get in 4-year college educations, in the histories, geographies, powers, cultures, languages, sciences, and development of thinking that together allow students to make sense of this world, that together allow them to illuminate the world's problems and shape their intelligent thinking about its solutions. So that's what the free college movement must avoid. It's why free college, even when it comes from the mouths of Bernie Sanders or the DSA, is absolutely not enough. The $66 fix faces squarely that higher education is incredibly expensive and more essential than ever before in human history. It also recognizes that real access to quality higher education is the superhighway for gender and racial equality, way more important than any diversity and inclusion program anywhere. And the $66 fix is premised on the recognition that unless free college is paired with the protection of quality, substantive education for all who seek it, what we will win with just a free college slogan is access to educational fast food. Now, this relates to a second danger I want to talk about for 1 minute before concluding. Since universal access to higher education is expensive, it must not be paid for by hacking into everything that makes it work. Union protected workers with decent salaries, health and pension plans, secure and decently paid faculty, affordable room and board for students, support for research in the research universities, and support for university infrastructures. The problem right now is that most tenured faculty simply struggle for their own interests, research, infrastructure, perks. The unions, whether those of lecturers or clerical workers or gardeners, struggle only for theirs. Students prioritize low tuition, affordability, and access. Administrators, who've mostly given up on state reinvestment, prioritize donor-attractive programs, which yank the universities toward things like $500 million football stadium renovations or corporate support for a few fields that leave most others starving. Not only do all these different interests pull in different directions and get played against each other at the top, none fight for the public investment in the entire enterprise and reckon with its substantial expense. So this is what the $66 fix aims to solve. It reclaims the California Master Plan, guaranteeing every California high school grad a place in the system and securing the quality of the system. It rehabilitates the K-12 public school system, whose ranking has now fallen to 37th in the nation, below Missouri, Tennessee, Georgia, and many other poorer states. It would be financed through the steeply progressive California income tax, not only costing the median taxpayer $66 annually, but 2/3 of state households less than $185 a year. And in a state with extreme income inequality, the few would pay a lot more, but no one in the 99% of the population would pay what it now costs to send their kid to UC or CSU. For example, someone making $150,000 a year with 2 kids who go to UC, instead of paying $160,000 for the education of those 2 kids, that person would be taxed a total of $30,000 over 30 years of earning that $150,000 income. Finally, the $66 fix would free up something really important: financial aid for non-tuition related support, housing, food, supplies. Why is this important? Because only if we provide those things to low-income students do they really get equal opportunity in education. Do they really thrive educationally? Because then they're not working full-time while they're also trying to learn. So the fix generates universal access to quality education and equality of opportunity within it, along with great universities oriented by and to the public good again. It would allow California to recover its place that it held for over 40 years as a literal model to the rest of the world as the way to run a public university system.
Thank you so much, Professor Wendy Brown. That is one of the most precise and brilliant and compelling cases I have heard made for something I really have always believed is a social necessity: the adequate funding of higher education and making it available for all students to attend tuition free. I think that was a brilliant presentation, and thank you so much. We are honored now to have with us Assemblyman Miguel Santiago, who has been made a co-host, Assemblymember Santiago, which means I believe you can turn your video on and we can hear from you as well. Now, for those who don't know, Assemblymember Santiago was the author of the bill that brought us tuition-free 2-year community college in the state of California. And he has a new bill just being introduced, which is AB 737, which is for a free, tuition-free attendance at California state universities. So 2 out of the 3 tiers will be covered. We, of course, here are committed to working towards all 3, but given the political realities of the day, we want to welcome a champion of lowering the costs of higher education in California to today's event, Assemblymember Santiago.
Hey, well, thank you very much for having me on, folks. And I wish this was in person. I can give everybody a hug and a high five for the good work that you're doing. And thank you, Alan and Professor Brown. I can't find you on my screen anymore, but that was pretty awesome in simple terms. Thank you for doing this. Look, I think most of you around the LA region really fought with us when we talked about the idea of free community college when I was on the community college board, and people thought it was crazy. And when we got to the legislature, many of you here within the LA region fought with us to try to make a debt-free college. And we did hit a lot of bumps in the road. But what we did open up was a conversation about starting with community college free. And so we did 1 year. And then we did a 2nd year. And last year, before the pandemic hit, we were on our way to making a portion of the CSU free. And this year, we're going to continue that with AB 737. Look, the goal is to make education debt-free, period. And we're going to keep taking chunks of it until we can do that. One of the reasons we started with community colleges is because those are some of the students in many cases who are in the most need and coming out of some of the working class communities within our area, but also because the community colleges in many different ways are equipped to give the wraparound support services and tools and second chance to those who may be not able to get to a university on their first go. And so once we created 2 years, a free community college, it's now time to start pressing at the CSU in slices so that we begin to really embrace a free education and a debt-free education. Let me tell you a little bit more about the free community college that we did for 2 years. It wasn't just free. It also provides that the schools participating in the program do the wraparound support services. That means they have the counselors in place. That means they have other tools like tutoring, other tools like the ability to have resources available to a student so they actually perform well. And it requires a student to go full time for the very reason that we know that when a student goes full time, their success rate is estimated between 60 and 70%, is what the community colleges told us. And here in LA, those cohorts of students who are now going through the what they call the Promise program are now actually above 80% in some cases of success from first year to 2 year, then to furthering their education. And we did it in a way where we really enriched the campuses also, because there in that bill there was flexible uses of the dollars for those who committed to the free community college movement, free education, debt-free movement, where some of those campuses, and this is statewide, but I talk about the LA region because I know that a little bit better. Some of those campuses are actually providing help with buying books. They're providing help with free transportation when we could go to class. And now they're providing the technology and the conductivity to be able to continue their education. So the bill was comprehensive. It was really a way to not only make community college free, but it was also a way to provide the campuses with the tools and resources necessary to complete a holistic approach towards education for the students. And we wrote it in such a way that it would do that. It put the campuses on hook to increase the quality of education. And so when we're taking a look at the first slices of how we make the CSU or the UC free, we began to take a look at the CSU programs that are quite successful, like the associate degrees for transfers, where we know students are going to be successful, where we know they're hungry to get their education, and we know they're prepared because they've now gone through those programs at the community college. And so we're making a very strong argument that those students who are prepared coming out of the community college and have fulfilled requirements that have already been set by the state have an opportunity for a free education once they're at the CSU. And again, look, I want to continue to work with you folks because we want to make education debt free, and it has to start making it free. We're not saying that there is another cost, and I acknowledge it 100%. There is a housing cost. There is a textbook cost that is just out of control, crazy when you take a look at some of these textbooks at $500 and $600 a textbook. But I think we need to send a strong message that at least with the dollars that we control in the state, and that our education system isn't a system that is for profit, but is a system that wants to do good. And quite frankly, it used to be free. You know, interestingly enough, last year when we did just a little between us and the Zoom world here, not a secret anymore, but we chose a building. We waited for a very long time when we first introduced the concept of free CSU to 1862. So it was AB 1862. And the reason we waited so long for that bill is because we wanted to have that conversation about when the CSU was first established in the state of California. And it was established in San Jose, and it was free. And the first CSU at the time, San Jose, 1862, was a free college. And so we stuck to that bill, and obviously we ran out of time because of COVID, but we really did strike a conversation in the legislature. And let me tell you how important it is that PDA is active on this issue, because many people don't buy into the conversation of a free education or a debt-free education. And it took a number of years. I mean, we kept introducing this bill over and over when we were talking about free community college, and quite frankly, didn't go very far. But we kept at it, we kept at it, we kept at it. And Governor Brown finally, as you all recall, who once sat on a community college board in Los Angeles, understood what we were trying to do when we got it to his desk. And we were fortunate enough that he signed 1 year. Newsom ran on the pledge of committing to 2 years, and we already had the bill waiting for him, so to speak, cooked on his desk when he got there. And so he signed it. And now we just need to keep the pressure on and make sure that we begin to talk about making a CSU free, and then we can move on to the rest of it. So thank you very much for having me on. I'm really excited about that. And in fact, at your national level, I'm hoping you engage in pushing for a debt-free education, like I know you are. I know that the Biden administration is currently in conversations about a free community college education. So they've reached out to us and asked us to circulate a letter within California. And so we're going to ask everybody to keep the pressure up, because we need to fight for this as fiercely as we can. Oh, and on the single payer, we're in. We just introduced myself, Mr. Oshkalra, Mr. Alex Lee. We introduced AB 1400 with about, I can't remember the number, 16 or 20 co-authors. The main authors of that is Mr. Oshkalra, myself, and Mr. Alex Lee from Northern California. And we plan to do a number of actions. This is my infomercial since I've got the stage for a second, and we're hoping that you would engage with us and make a lot of noise. We have some tentative dates. I don't want to throw them around until we're certain, but we're looking at the beginning of March, and I'm hoping that I could reach back out to you, Alan, to maybe send you guys the information. We're thinking about kicking around a rally. We want to make it safe, so there'll only be a few people out of their cars, and the rest of the people driving around honking and making some real noise and getting media attention, and making sure that we hit the social medium communication points as hard as we possibly can to raise the noise level so that we can get this thing done. So we've got a lot of fights ahead of us, and thank you for having me on. Alan, thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you so much, Assemblymember Santiago, and we will be with you, of course, on single-payer universal health care in California. And thank you for the introduction of that bill. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Now I'm going to jump off because I got to feed my kids, so thank you.
Go for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And up next, we have Professor Charles Toombs. He is the president of the California Faculty Association. He is with the New Deal for Higher Education. He's on the New Deal for Higher Education Steering Committee. He's a professor of Africana Studies at San Diego State University, from the state university system that Assemblymember Santiago was just talking about. Welcome, Professor Toombs. Oh, we need to unmute Professor Toombs, or he needs to unmute himself.
There I am. I'm good. Can you hear me now? All right. Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, early evening, everyone. I am president of the California Faculty Association, and we represent tenure-line faculty, lecturer faculty, librarian faculty, coaching faculty, and counseling faculty in the largest public higher education system in the country. And we have always been supportive of any ways that we can either end student debt or drastically reduce the amount of money that students pay. We serve almost 500 million students. The majority of our students are students of color. And I know at least I hope I'm preaching to the choir here. And I know that both Mark and Christopher Newfield and Wendy Brown, and then Assemblymember Santiago, have already indicated what the major issues are with the amount of debt that our students face, and its impact on all aspects of their life and their community's life. But I do want to say a little bit about the New Deal for Higher Education campaign. It was launched nationally on February the 10th. It is co-led by the AAUP and by AFT. And just last week, I was appointed as one of 2 AAUP representatives to its steering committee. So that committee has not met yet. But I want to just say a little bit about what this New Deal is. It certainly will work well with the $66 fix. It will take a number of issues to the national federal level. The campaign envisions a higher education to support a diverse citizenry in working towards the common good. Our campaign will use collective action to influence college and university policies, advocate for state legislation, and ultimately work with members of Congress and the Biden administration to reauthorize the Federal Higher Education Act and create other federal higher education policies that establish stable and dedicated public funding streams for all institutions of education. The funding will be used toward the goals of, and I just want to say a little bit about some of those. Certainly prioritizing teaching, research, and supporting student success, which is the mission for most of our higher education institutions in the country. Reducing the cost of higher education so students can attend debt-free. Certainly that's in line with the Fix 66 plan. Ensuring job security, equitable pay, professional voice, and sustainable careers for all faculty. And this is extremely important because our higher education institutions have not really worked for faculty of color in all ways, in terms of hiring, valuing their research, their promotion and tenure process. And higher education has not worked for contingent faculty, who in so many of our institutions carry the bulk of our instruction. We need to create academic environments free from racism, sexism, and other bigotries that prevent learning, degrade research, and perpetuate inequality. In the California Faculty Association 5 years ago, almost 6 now, we moved to an anti-racism and social justice transformation that is both internally and externally. We had to reevaluate ourselves and our own structures that were still operating from a white supremacy cultural lens. In doing that, it moved so much of our traditional union work to different trajectories. For example, you've already mentioned it, but we wrote a paper that really emphasized some of the ideas you've already heard this evening. Our Equity Interrupted looked at how when the majority students in the CSU became students of color, the funding dwindled. And we were able to use that white paper to have significant influence in the state capitol. And we began to have legislators like Santiago and so many more who are concerned with social justice and ending racial inequity, that we began to get more funding to the CSU. We're far from where we need to be. The point I want to make as you pursue the 66 fix is that you're going to have to frame it in terms of the students who are actually impacted now. So we have all these students of color who are graduating with this debt now. So that is certainly something that I hope you're doing. I know you will be doing it. Also, in terms of making influence at the federal level, we need to ensure that we are having connections with community groups like Black Lives Matters and other community groups. If you look at the appointments to the Biden administration, you look at having a Black woman vice president, that was particularly because of this moment that we're in now, where people really want to address systemic racism and do something about it. Higher education policy must do that as well. And we hope that you will become a part of the New Deal for higher education. We think it has the opportunity to actually create policy and influence legislators in Washington to actually overhaul, in many ways, our higher education system that has only typically worked for white people. And it is time for that to change. It must work for faculty of color and students of color. So those are my remarks. I am on board. That goes without saying. I hope to work with you, and I hope that you can work with us. So thank you. I know time is running out, so I guess I got my remarks in a timely manner.
No, but you also raise, I think, what is, I have to now bracket and just drop all thoughts of all the technical problems we've had. Let's forget all that and stick to the point you raise and Wendy raises and the Assemblyman raises. How do we build a movement for this? How do we get a movement so that we can actually achieve the ends that we seek here in terms of elevating and all, you bring up the issue of the under faculty and their exploitation. And so next up, we're going to go to Stephen Filling very briefly, then Emmeline Bennett. We have 3 other people we'll hear from briefly. We want to get to questions, but actually, Wendy, I did want to ask you your thoughts on the under faculty, their exploitation, and the $66 fix, and then also about bringing some of the forces that we have here, including YSDA. We have Amar Shargil, who's the head of the Progressive Caucus of the Democratic Party. We have 2 progressive candidates into a movement so that we can have the kind of social pressure we need to achieve this end. To Wendy. Yeah.
I would just say that I agree with Charles down the line. And one of the things the $66 fix does by bringing the revenue streams to all 3 tiers back up to what it was in the year 2000 is make the capacity within the budgets at the CCs, the CSUs, and the UCs to not only stop adjunctification and instead offer security of employment to lecturers where appropriate, but also to negotiate terms and conditions that are much better than the ones that are now offered, which sometimes can be, hold on to your seats for this, less than $2,000 per course. That's $2,000 over 4.5 months of teaching for a single course. So to get a decent income together, one that's livable within our cities in California, what does that mean? You would have to teach 5 or 6 courses per semester to survive. That is not doable, and yet it's being done. The quality deteriorates. The conditions for the teacher are beyond description, and the universities and employers look the other way. So that's what needs to be stopped. That's what the unions need to be empowered to be able to stop. And that's part of what the $66 fix contributes to by restoring funding levels.
Thank you so much. And up next, I'd like to introduce Stephen Filling. He is a teacher at Cal State Stanislaus, and he is the president of the California Conference of the American Association of University Professors. And again, back to our technical issues, if Mike Thaler, you can make Stephen Filling a co-host so we can hear him and see him for his thoughts and contributions to this. After this, we'll hear from Emmeline Bennett. And just going forward, we'll hear from congressional candidate Angelica Duenas and Derek Marshall, both who should also be made co-hosts so we can see them as well. And one of the things that's happened very quickly in the country is the development of movement and social pressure movement on student debt. Of course, if we maintain the cost of colleges, there'll just be new generations accumulating more student debt. Obviously, these 2 movements do need to go hand in hand for the welfare of people who are going to the university and to colleges, and for the general social welfare. And Stephen Filling, welcome. You are still muted. Can you unmute yourself?
I can indeed.
Take it away.
The part about my history, the embarrassing part that Alan didn't share, I was trained as a CPA, so I'm now an accountant who's in recovery, which I guess might explain my approach to some of what we're talking about this evening. One of the phrases I hear in Sacramento when I talk with legislators a lot about higher education is students need to have some skin in the game. I've always found that a rather odious phrase, as if somehow putting your life on hold for 6 or 8 or 10 years isn't enough skin in the game. You should be subject to penury as well. But I think in a sense that aligns with the notion that Wendy and Charles both brought up in perhaps coarser terms, as the students of the university system got darker, the funding got lighter. And I want to really emphasize how we get out of this. First off, we can't go back. And I don't think it makes any sense for us to talk about returning to the way things used to be. It's just not going to happen. But I think it's also true that we accomplish things by persistence. That is, we keep going when things don't go right the first time. We can't get eliminating student debt through Biden. That's a one-time fix for the cost of higher education. If we can't get a one-time fix through, then I think we're probably going to struggle to get a permanent fix through. I like to frame it like this. When I talk to students in my ethics class, we talk about poverty, and I ask them, how do we fix poverty? And a lot of them immediately respond with education. And after we talk for a little bit, it comes with a caveat with education, except the education can't keep you in poverty forever, which suggests to me that we need to find other ways to fund education. I'm an accountant. I'll talk about those other ways. One way, reform the property tax system. Yes, Prop 15 didn't work. CSU just got landmark legislation last year, AB 1460, mandating ethnic studies in the curriculum. That was the third try for that. It didn't work the first two times either. Prop 15 didn't work, come back again stronger. Another choice, the wealth tax. Elon Musk can do without $1 billion or two here and there, especially since he moves to Texas. An oil severance tax. However, be aware with oil severance, that is sort of a declining balance kind of a tax because we're going to have to get off oil. That's going to go away. Maybe another choice, a tax on financial transactions. That is being talked about at the national level, and this has so much else, I truly believe that California needs to lead the way. In the 1960s, a high school kid in Iowa wanting to go to college thought of nothing more than, can I please move to California where I don't have to go into horrendous debt to go to college? That worked for California then. It can work for California now. And this is so much else. Again, we need to lead the way. We need to figure out how to deal with the uncertainty of funding. But again, please don't frame this as we need to go back. We don't need to go back. We need to go forward. And I guess a final point, the notion that I've seen in the chat a couple times this afternoon that we should pay for the degrees that matter. They mentioned nurses and engineers and scientists. I'll note that I was a founding member of several computer clubs in the 70s and 80s, and it turns out the people that were doing frontline research there were all trained as musicians. Who the heck would have thought somebody who learned how to play clarinet was going to do world-class computer programming? They do it. So sorry for the scattered nature of those thoughts, but this is a good fight. We need to stay in it. Thank you.
I do want to say, in terms of going forward or going backwards, and it's appropriate, the next guest is from YDSA. Then we're going to hear from Senator John Leard. We're going to take questions, and we're going to hear from, again, the people who were not listed as well, briefly, from Angelica and Amar, if he's still here, and Derek. But the Bernie Sanders movement, the two campaigns, the popularity of him as a political candidate among younger Americans, I think it's fair to say that if we lived in a sort of Logan's Run universe and people only under 30 could vote, Bernie would have won in a landslide. Under 40, Bernie still would have won in a landslide. My understanding is under 50, Bernie still would have won pretty handily. So we have a new generation who's coming up. And now people may not even remember that student debt cancellation wasn't on the Sanders agenda in 2016, but free college was. And if people had said like 5 years ago that one of the most vibrant youth organizations in the country would be Young Democratic Socialists of America, I think they would have said I was dreaming and I was involved in some kind of like left-wing utopian fantasy to think that could be possible. But it's the reality. And so I'm very excited to introduce, and again, if we can make her co-host, Emmeline Bennett, who is with YDSA. And again, I think an essential organization that can help anchor a movement, a mass movement, to demand that we have the $66 fix and that we have, so fully funding in the manner that Wendy and Christopher have outlined, but also just, tuition-free higher education. Because I do believe, given the idea of 30s and unders, 40s and unders, and 50s and unders, who, even with as crazy a year as it's been, it's fair to say, are going to be alive a lot longer than those of us like myself who are above all those age brackets. We have a real possibility of, again, not going back, but reconfiguring in a very positive way the way that higher education operates in the country. So Emmeline Bennett, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for that intro. So I'm Emmeline. I'm part of the National Coordinating Committee of WWII and also a member of Columbia WWII. And so we're the student campus section of the largest socialist organization in the US. And we organize students and workers to win material improvements in their lives and also for a vision of free college for all, education as a human right, and a democratized university system. And since this is a call about California specifically, we've done a lot of organizing in California around increased funding for public education through the Prop 15 campaign, which all of our chapters in California mobilized around. And one organizing project that I've been involved specifically is the Columbia tuition strike, which garnered the support of 4,500 students at Columbia. It's the largest tuition strike in history around a reduction in tuition, but also other demands around democratization of the university more generally, including demands relating to labor rights, defunding police, opposing gentrification, and student control over investments and divestment. And now we have commitments from students at 11 other universities, including universities in California, for tuition strikes in the fall semester. So these strikes could really involve tens of thousands of students later this year, and I think could really be part of a nationwide movement for college for all and the democratization of the university. But at the national level in WWII, we're also leading a campaign for student debt cancellation, which we see as a demand that is sort of like has to necessarily be connected to this demand for free college. And we see it as something that, if we win, it could help to build up this movement for free college for all, and also the movement for other kinds of debt cancellation, medical debt cancellation, and so on, and for this vision of what that collective calls restorative public goods, of both shifting power towards the working class through this immediate debt cancellation, but also making sure that no one has to go in debt in the future by providing these things as social goods. And student debt cancellation, we're organizing around it because it would shift power towards the working class and it would close the racial and gender wealth gaps. And it's something that Biden can do with the stroke of a pen, although he's currently refusing to do it, at least in any meaningful way. And another thing that we're working on is a lot of labor organizing. We really think that that's sort of where our power comes from. So we're building a labor for student debt cancellation coalition to organize workers, especially teachers and healthcare workers who have are very burdened by student debt. As a teacher in training, I really feel that, and so have an interest in sort of joining with students to campaign for its cancellation. And I would just conclude by saying overall we really are fighting for this because we believe in education as a human right, which needs to be decommodified and democratized across the board. And so if you want to figure out how to get more involved, you can sign our petition for student debt cancellation, or if you want to be involved in a more sort of extensive way, you can volunteer we're doing bi-weekly phone banks, or if you're a college student, you can join WWII. And yeah, that's it for me. Thanks so much for having me.
I couldn't be more thrilled that WWII actually is joining in a coalition that PDA is a part of, along with the Debt Collective and Our Revolution and Social Security Works in the California, the CUCFA and AAUP through Eric Hayes, and that is the Cancel Student Debt Campaign. So thrilled to be working with you, Emmeline, and thank you so much for joining us today. So we're going to go to questions with Wendy Bloom, and of course we have Derek Marshall and Angela Duenas can speak in the question and answer period, as well as Amr if he's still here. And while everybody is getting their questions prepared, we have one more very short video to play, which is from Senator John Leard, very important player in all of this, because we've heard from 2 assembly members, but have yet to hear from someone from the California State Senate, of course, bicameral legislative body here in California. And he, as he'll tell you, is the chair of the relevant committee for oh boy, how am I going to get this? Maybe we should go to Angelica while I get that ready first, because I'm going to have to flip around and make sure I get the right video up, and I don't want to keep people waiting again. So Angelica Duenas, are you available now? I see that you're here, and if we can get Angelica as a co-host and available to speak.
Yeah.
Hey, Angelica, by the way, is a brilliant candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives who ran against Tony Cardenas, a moderate centrist right-wing Democrat in the Burbank, Upper Valley, Sylmar area of Southern California. Angelica drew about 44% in a grassroots campaign, a spectacular result, and is going to be challenging again in the upcoming election. She was endorsed by PDA as a candidate in the last election. Take it away, Angelica.
Thank you so much, Alan. I do appreciate everybody who was speaking here today. I think this is a very important fight, and there's so many aspects of it. There's so many ways of pushing through it. As we know, we're pushing for Medicare for all nationally, federally, but here in California, we continue to also push for Medicare for all single payer system. Some folks might or may not be familiar that in Canada, their single payer system didn't pass all at once nationwide. It was provincial, they say. So it's super important for us to keep on fighting and to really show the rest of the country what we can accomplish here. And it's super important that at the same time that we support and get behind grassroots candidates at all levels who are supporting the fights, the issues that really matter, Medicare for all, tuition-free university, affordable housing as a human right, because it's super important. I think that tuition-free higher education is a must in order to really advance as a society and to really bring some equality and equity to the system that is the whole United States. And we all know that it's been built on a racist and one could say abusive systems throughout the centuries. I am super grateful for everyone who has been keeping strong in this fight. This is something that has been going on for a very long time. Long before I even knew about these concrete issues that can really bring solutions to the problems that we're facing. I think that similar to healthcare for all or Medicare for all, a higher education really is something that is a human right. And so by bringing the attention here in California to the fight that we can make it happen, to make it a reality, is something that I am 100% behind. And I think that this is a fight that I'm very proud to be familiar with, and I would love to be able to be helpful in any way. I do think that it's super important, again, to get behind people who are already elected officials, people who are in positions of power already, who are backing these issues, because without our support, without us getting behind them, these things cannot happen. Change happens from the bottom up. And this is something that we, the people who are privileged enough to be aware of what's happening, need to educate our local groups, people and neighbors, friends and family, that we have an opportunity here in California to make tuition-free higher education a reality beyond junior college now, or community college now. So just thank you so much for everybody who is fighting the good fight, who is putting in the time and the effort to educate us and to make us aware of what's happening, how we can be a part of this movement, and to continue the fight for a tuition-free America, a tuition-free University America. So thank you everybody for all your hard work. Thank you for being here on a Sunday. That's like my laundry day. So I was, listening and doing stuff at the same time. So I am super grateful for everyone being here today. And I look forward to more of these meetings, more of these workshops, and becoming familiar with the movement here in California and how we can work together here in California and nationwide to make a tuition-free higher education a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelica. And now ready to go here with Senator John Leard's presentation. Thank you, Angelica Duenas, again running in CD 29. When we come back, we'll have a quick rapid fire Q&A session.
Hello, this is Senator John Laird, and I am really sorry that I can't be with you today, but I am with you in spirit because a town hall for tuition-free higher education is very close to my heart and close to what I'm working for in the legislature. I am one of those lucky people that is old enough to be of a generation where I went to the University of California when there were almost no fees, and I graduated without any debt, being the kid of a middle-class teacher and somebody that went back to school at the same time. That is simply not possible now. And it is just awful because if people have debt to get out of school, it keeps them out of the housing market, which is hard as it is really not fair. It is not the equal opportunity that we hope for in the higher education system. And there are many proposals afoot, and I know that some of them are going to be discussed today that at this conference. And it's so important because part of it is changing the opinion of the public and convincing them that we can do this, or there are ways to do this. It might not be exactly what people are proposing, but the goals are clear. Can higher education still be the great equalizer in our society without people mortgaging their entire future to get that equity out of the higher education system? And we have many things we're looking at the legislature that are just small bites of what this conference is about, because the Student Aid Commission is starting to make a proposal that we have scholarships that don't just cover fees, but they cover everything that is a barrier economically to students, whether it's housing or books or just basic living expenses, so that people can graduate without debt. And it's very important that this be done in conjunction with public universities, public that we invest in. So I just really look forward to seeing what comes from the conference today. I happen to be now the chair of the subcommittee of the budget for education in the state Senate. And we are having hearings, just 8 of them this month, where we're going through student aid, every branch of higher education, as well as K through 12. And the student aid issues are at the center. We're in a particularly perilous time where, because of COVID and because of economic circumstances, we have the highest level of people that are unsheltered and students in higher education than we've ever had. We have the highest level of food insecurity of people in higher education. We have one of the highest levels of debt of people coming out of higher education. This can't stand. So I just congratulate you for focusing on these issues. Hope that there are fundamental things that come out of this that we can act on. But more than anything, hope that you all organize to influence people across California that this is something they should take up, they should lobby for, and a few of them should even want to pay for through their taxes to make this happen and return equity to our higher education system. So I look forward to the time I can be with you again in person, and I look forward to working with you on these issues this year and in the coming year. Best wishes for a successful conference.
Okay, everybody, and that was Senator John Laird. And I actually have a question for Wendy Brown. What has been the history of the proposal, the $66 fix? Has it been taken up by any assembly people, any state senators as it exists? What's been its history with its relationship to the California Democratic Party? I understand it was once the $48 fix, then Prop 98 passed. which mandated that 30% of all higher education funded, whatever was allocated for higher education funding, 30% of it also had to be allocated for K through 12, which is a good thing. We all need more funding for K through 12 as well. What's been the history of the $66 fix, and even a follow-up, what's the pathway forward for proceeding with this as a concrete proposal in your mind?
You know, I'm not actually well equipped to answer this question, and I'm going to ask Eric, who's in this meeting, to answer it on the chat, because I can throw some things at it, but and I can say that the 66, once upon a time, $48 fix has now been developed for a decade. Eric's just told us legislators have not taken it up. They're always scared of talking about raising taxes. There's tremendous support for increasing funding for higher education, including through tax increases on the part of Californians. But legislators are terrified. And I think the winds have changed, because I think we are in a moment of a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for large government spending at the national level that will trickle down to state levels. You know, the belief that the government should be handling the expenses of COVID, that the government should be providing debt relief, that Medicare for all is something we can do. I think that this press, of course, coming very much out of Occupy and Sanders and DSA and all of these other movements, but has now become a mainstream belief, so that instead of thinking of taxes as theft, I think we have returned to the belief on the part of at least, I want to say, left of center to left, that the basis for a decent, sustainable, just, and civilized world is progressive taxation. There are some who also believe there's modern monetary theory magic, but that's another story. And I think there's a tremendous amount of support for it. So this is the moment. And I want to take the moment to answer a question that already came up in the chat, how to keep thinking about the articulation between California and the national movement. Connie Penley offered one answer, which is, I think, a really important one. If California can do this and can make it a big campaign with a movement behind it and a lot of legislative support, it will become a model for a national movement. It has to move up through the states. If it comes top down, we will be in that educational fast food world that I warned about. We will be in that world of skimpy funding, mostly oriented toward vocational schools, mostly oriented toward the cheapest education that one can possibly offer. And it will still leave our public universities high and dry. And that would be a terrible mistake, because those public universities are where most of our contemporary young populations want to end up, and especially, I want to say, Black and Brown and Indigenous populations. So it would be a terrible thing if we just said, let's make this a national movement and hope for the best. We can control it if we do it at the state level. I won't be so long-winded in future answers, I promise.
No, and of course, it is $66 for the median household is so affordable. And while California does have a solidly progressive tax rate, again, $180 for 75% of the households and lower. And, you know, the people who are going to get above that likely can afford it.
Let's grab a few questions from
yes.
Let's do that. Minutes.
We do, but okay. Christopher Connery has a question in the chat, but I do want to see. Okay, let's ask Christopher's question. Then we have Derek Marshall, Jenna Beck, and Dorothy Reich. And Christopher Connery is: does anyone with legislative or ballot experience have any thoughts about why tax or bond measures for higher education have done poorly across the state over the last few years? How do we get out of that cycle? Do you want to take a stab at that, or does anybody else, Stephen or Charles? Stephen, that might be in your wheelhouse in terms of, Charles, go ahead. No, Charles, you're up.
I can just say very quickly that what you find is that in California in particular, but not exclusively, people who are extremely progressive on many issues, probably marched with Black Lives Matter all summer long, and believe in, abolishing the police and getting rid of prisons and the rest of it, will still not vote to increase their own taxes. And I have long wanted to do a study right here in Berkeley where we look at how people vote on taxes and how they represent themselves as socialists even, or as strongly left-leaning on every other issue. And that has to be challenged, and it has to be challenged through an open campaign about what tax-supported things provide. And we've had 35 years of taxes are theft, taxes are taking things away from you, and most Californians have gotten used to that, even on the left.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say, and I'm getting a little beat up in the secret chat here, is that I have not done as I was supposed to let people know that these events do cost money for PDA. Mike Fox is going to put a link in for people to donate, and please donate if you can. Give $5, $10. We're splitting the money between PDA California and PDA National. So please donate what you can, and Mike Fox is going to drop the donation link into the chat. Derek Marshall, you're up next if you are able to talk. Derek is running for Congress in the 8th District out towards the Nevada border out in Victorville, a very progressive candidate. Derek, the floor is yours, and maybe your thoughts on tuition-free public college here in California and any kind of question you might have for our panelists.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Derek Marshall. I'm a progressive organizer and activist who calls Victorville, California home. I was a staffer for the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign, and most recently, I helped to staff the team of voters who registered the 70,000 voters in Georgia between the general and the runoff. After college, I lived in Europe for a while. I organized an international youth initiative that helped to facilitate access to United Nations in Geneva, and opened the international office for Kayak in Berlin. My time in Europe showed me firsthand how a strong social safety net benefits its citizens. Berlin's incredible. I'm running for Congress because I want to bring the folks of the high desert, so my community, the high desert and the mountains, together to bring us a more livable life. A livable life that includes Green New Deal, a livable life that guarantees every single person healthcare, single payer Medicare for all system, and kind of what we're all talking about tonight, a livable life that ensures a high quality education through college for all, and which includes most immediately canceling all student loan debt. I believe that when we come together, we win. It's all about organizing. I've been really, really impressed with the organizing that's happening on the part of DSA around AB 1400. And I think that we're going to need to do something very similar. I'm going to leave it at that for right now. Thank you, Alan, and to all of our wonderful speakers today. I'm really, really happy to be here in solidarity. And please let me know how our campaign can be of service to this $66 fix. And please check out my website. I'm going to put it here in the chat. It's derekmarshallca.com. Sign up to be a volunteer, and I'm very happy to leverage our campaign to be in solidarity with different individual issue advocacy. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Derek Marshall. And you get a big gold star for being so succinct. That is a very compelling thing for us as we are pressed for time. Jenna Beck, a question.
Well, more of a, a statement on the whole conversation from tonight. So my parents both went to private school in the 60s, and their tuition cost like $500 a year. That was back in the 60s, right? And at that time, the UC system, I think, was free, and so was the Cal State system. So we're just talking about California tonight. The college system, my grandmother also got her degree from UCLA for free. And over my lifetime, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, education is so expensive. We can't do this anymore, right? Like, we can't do this. But it was legit free for all of my ancestors. And I just, I really can't get over that. But on top of it, we talk about college a lot. Like, we focus a lot on college and universities, But at the same time, we are watching the pilfering of K through 12 happen right now. And it's been happening since the 90s. And so my appeal to progressives is to do more to say, no, a moratorium on charter schools is not enough. We cannot have charter schools. It is the pilfering of public education. It is the exact same thing that they did to colleges to make it so that people would be disenfranchised and would not be able to actually get higher education. And that is now what we are seeing in through K through 12. So we, as a progressive community, need to do more to make sure that whoever we are advocating as candidates are not supporting charter schools in any fashion whatsoever. That being said, I also want to plug my meeting for next week. Apparently, I'm not supposed to drop it in the chat, but I do have, it is Black History Month, y'all. And I have a couple of great speakers coming up next month. So please join me on March 21st.
Well, I actually want to pitch it too. It's a great group. Just say who the speakers are. People probably know of the people, right? If I'm correct, it's a former Georgia State coordinator for Bernie Sanders, right? And Marcus Farrell, and who else?
And Mondial Robinson. I'm so excited, Alan.
Right. Yeah. Also, two absolutely brilliant guests. And so look out for that. That is Gennebeck's Orange County PDA chapter, and I believe the subject is reparations. So thank you for that. Let's just do, there's no question there, so quickly to move on, because I know probably Wendy and everybody has to leave here. I know that Mike wants to leave, who's running this. Let's do Progressive Stack and go to Carolyn Fowler next. Carolyn, you're up. If you can speak, I know we've had trouble with all of this. Carolyn, can you speak? Yep, go for it.
Greetings. Hey, thanks everybody. This has been a great session. I wanted to just comment on your point about taxes. Over the years. Frankly, the business community, the residential, they are tough on taxes. But I will say what they have been supportive of is bond measures. And particularly when you tell them it's about schools, and COVID helped a lot because of all the restructuring and everything that has to happen, whether it's the water systems, the ventilator systems. But the truth of the matter is, the United States of America has not invested in public schools. I'm a government affairs for one of the board members, Dr. George McKenna at LAUSD. He has spoken to the Congress on this specific issue. I do say this, Bobby Scott, who is the chair of education, has got it. He understands what the problem is. When half of our state's investment goes into education, just the budget, half the budget right from the beginning, that tells you right there has not been enough federal investment. And I do believe that we need to give them a little chance. They do understand that. They do understand the criticality, and not only from K through 12, but higher education as well. So what progressives can do is keep pressing that message with our federal legislators and friends and foes, I might add, not just the Democrats, but the Republicans as well. I think a well-organized campaign on keeping their commitment on educating our students is what we need to do.
Thank you so much, Carolyn Fowler. Commentary to Wendy Brown. And Wendy, if you do have to leave, just take off. We have two more people on stack, and if you do have to go, final thought. If not, for the last two people on stack, and we'll be out of here within 10 minutes. But go ahead, Wendy. Nothing to add, or no? Okay, Dorothy Reich, you're up.
So I'm just gonna reiterate my usual gripe about Ivy League schools. I would like to see all these Ivy League schools have their endowments taken away and given to state-run state universities, and they have caused us wars, neoliberalism, everything bad that's going on in this country today. I think you could lay at the feet of as Alan said, they were called the future leaders when they got the freshman orientation, and they have led us down the garden path to destruction. I think they should take their endowments and hand them over to the public schools, public colleges, and as far as I'm concerned, they can take their buildings and make them into low-income housing. I think they are a destructive force in our country from the Vietnam War on, and I would just like to hear what anybody else has to say about it. I mean, Josh Hawley, I like to blame Harvard for Josh Hawley, but actually he went to Stanford where they didn't bother reading his articles in his student newspaper where he supported Timothy McVeigh. So this is what we're dealing with.
Of course, his support of Timothy McVeigh only makes him seem like he was ahead of the curve in the contemporary Republican Party. Sorry, that's my cynical thought for the moment. I am, as Dorothy implied there, myself an Ivy League graduate, and I have to say I agree with Dorothy, but I also think this, and I spoke with Christopher Newfield about this yesterday, and I'd love to hear Wendy's thoughts on this or anybody else from the panel who wants to chime in. There's actually a young man, young professor, Ben Burgess, who frequently appears on Jacobin podcasts. He has a book called Give Me an Argument. I'm also apparently, I bump into him on all the shows I do interviews on. He's a sharp guy. He just put out a little piece that you can find on YouTube from Jacobin saying that, yes, we need tuition-free public college, but it'll be very problematic unless you also have basically public domain over Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, and the line. And his argument is that you'll get, that's why Bernie Sanders calls for universal single-payer healthcare. You can't have private insurance companies because you'll get a two-tiered system, one for the rich and one for everybody else. And speaking to Christopher Newfield just the other day, and this was right after we did the recording, I, of course, agree with that. However, I also think if you're talking about concentrated political power in the United States of America, you could not come up with a more concentrated political power than the alumni associations of Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Duke, Stanford on down the line. So Wendy Brown, what's your thoughts on that argument and maybe the sense that there's a danger there? And I do acknowledge the danger, but what's your thoughts on it as a priority or in the future type of thing?
Well, certainly the Ivies and privates more generally are dedicated to reproducing an elite and hierarchy and inequality and concentration of wealth and plutocracies. There's more to them than that, because the paradox always of higher education is that once you start thinking and once you start allowing thinkers in, other thoughts get thought. And you, Alan, are an example of that. That said, I mean, we can be grumpy about the Ivies and angry about the tiered system of higher education in this country and most other countries. But I think focusing our wrath there, I mean, it's not going to work. We're not going to abolish them. They're not going to hand away, they can't by law hand off endowments that their donors designated for them. So I just think it's one thing to be, kind of pissed off and eat the rich about it. And that's fine. I can spend an evening that way as much as anyone else on this chat. But I think to focus on progressive taxation to support higher education has the advantage of taxing that wealth. Let those kids go to Harvard, but make sure their parents pay for public schools. And that's why income tax is such a, I mean, even though everyone says, oh, can't we get this some other way? But the advantage of income tax, especially California's income tax, is that it's so progressively structured. So those millionaires who are going to send their kids off to the Ivies will be paying a preponderance of the share of refunding California public higher education. And that's not going to satisfy the eat the rich impulse, but it's certainly eating away at a little of their riches.
And Mike Fox is next. There's Jorge Silva. There's one thing I wanted to bring up in this, and I meant to earlier many times, and I keep failing to do so, which is expenditures for the prison industrial complex in the state of California. My understanding is that is another pool of revenue that, of course, should be diminished and abolished, as it were, and the funding can go towards higher education. In fact, there's been, over the last 40 years, a decline in really investment in higher education and a rise, as we all know, in investment in the prison industrial complex. I don't know that there's a question there, actually. I just sort of wanted to say that. So, Mike Fox, you're up, and then Jorge, and then that's it. And we'll all be going home, and we'll be thanking Wendy and everybody. Mike Fox, take it away.
Indeed. Just a very quick question in regards to the $66 fix. Excuse me. Well, I understand the state approach. I'm in Florida. It's going to be an even more uphill battle here. Can we say that that the cost per household changes as cost of living does? So, for example, is it the $56 solution in Florida or in Alabama?
Great
You're mute.
question. Great question. It would have to be calculated for each state because it's a question of how much disinvestment the state has engaged in over these past 30 years. That is how much it's pulled away from its public institutions, and then what the taxpayer base looks like. California happens to have a pretty damn expensive higher education system because it was built to be comprehensive. It was built to educate every single Californian. So it's more expensive than many others where that expectation is not in play, but that doesn't mean it can't, that others can't aspire to something like that. So look, I'm not a states' rights status type person. I'm not saying we should do this state by state, but I am a localist. I do believe that if we can build these campaigns at the local level, they can synergistically empower one another, just as the free college and debt relief campaigns, which have to be understood differently. One is about a past generation, and one is about restructuring the whole financing and organization of higher ed. They can't just be shoved together, or all we're doing is screaming principles instead of having real plans. But they can be synergistically powerful in building the case for the public good of education and the wrong of indebting anyone for it. So I think, to go back to Florida, if you want the folks in CUCFA, the Council of UC Faculty Associations, to help do those calculations, I'm sure they would. If we could build this in a number of states, I'm sure we'd be glad to do it. And I think it would be a fantastic set of solidarity campaigns among us.
Jorge Silva with the final question. Take it away.
Hello, thank you so much for this event. Not a question, but just a comment. Myself, I'm a community college student. I'm on my second year, gonna transfer pretty soon, and I'm very happy. But as a difference from many of my friends, I have a family that is loving. I have a family that provides me food. I have a roof over my head. I don't have children to worry about. I don't have my siblings that I have to take care of constantly. And I have friends that are like that. I have a friend that right now is working because she has mental health issues, therefore she cannot maintain good grades. Therefore, financial aid got revoked. Then what happens? She doesn't have financial aid, she cannot afford school, and right now she is working in order to get back into community college. She is working right now to be able to have another opportunity. I have friends that have dropped out of school because they simply believe that they just cannot make it. And I cannot blame them. I mean, they have to choose sometimes between eating a good meal or being able to pay like their rental utilities plus their education. It is a very bad situation, and myself being involved also in the Student Center for California Community Colleges, I see this so much. I see so many stories of so many students, immigrant students, that have faced discrimination from their staff and faculty. So it's just horrible, the fact that we have to pay so much and sometimes choose, do I eat properly and do I have a nice house to like be in for now, or do I go to this good education? And that is monstrous. Therefore, when I hear sometimes saying like, oh, progressive, and I don't think it should be a party thing. I do not like the idea of like, oh, but like, the right might be like, no, it's about people. It's about students trying to get an opportunity. It's about students that believe that they can't, to have the opportunity to people to tell them, yes, you can, and here are the tools. Because how can a person that is working on fields, that has a family that is struggling, how can they go to education when they need to feed their families, they need to feed their mouths, and they're not getting sufficient aid to be able to do that? Therefore, I just wanted to just kind of like rant about that, because I hear like parties being mentioned. This shouldn't be a party thing. It should be a thing about people. And if a person red or blue, chooses against education and against the future and against what my children will be in when I am an adult, that is just don't anyone to get in the way of that is just highly unethical. And again, it shouldn't be about parties. But that's kind of it. Thank you for standing for the students. Thank you for holding these things. It's very appreciated. And I wish you all the best of luck. And myself, I will do my best too, in order to make sure that the students are heard as part of my organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorge Silva. And Wendy, a final comment, and if any of the other panelists have a final comment, and then we'll shut down the recording.
I think Jorge had the final comment. Jorge, first of all, welcome to the next stage of your education, and thank you for being what you already are: passionate, political, intelligent, educated, determined, and si se puede.
Thank you so much, Wendy Brown. And unless we hear back from another of our panelists, I just want to thank everybody. We're 15 minutes over. I want to remind people, of course, that they can chat, they can drop a donation in the link that Mike Fox had put into the chat earlier, which maybe Mike could drop in again. And I really do want to thank Wendy. I'll be throwing to David Wright in a second to close out. But look, I really do hope that we can build a movement. This has been a good first step in terms of trying to get something moving in California. We had a number of elected officials who clearly are presenting themselves as allies to us. There is an absence of this kind of movement in California right now. I want to, of course, give a big shout out to Constance Penley from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and Eric Hayes, who lives in Davis, California, UC Davis, and he's with a number of organizing institutions that were involved in setting this up. I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank Charles Toombs, Stephen Filling, Emmeline Bennett, of course, Senator John Leard, Majority Leader Eloise Reyes, and again, Miguel Santiago, as well, Assemblyman, and thank everybody. But again, the hard work of really getting this out and elevated as a subject for progressives around the state and the country to fight for, that will be our work at PDA. And I want to thank everybody for being here. And I want to thank all of your patience in terms of the technological problems. And David Wright, take it away.
Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate how well you did moderating tonight's program, and I'm very appreciative to the amount of work you put in this, and you did a Herculean job hooking this all together. I further want to acknowledge and thank Mike Thaler, the president of PDA-CA, and throw thanks out to every chapter leader in the state of California who helped promote this chat to everybody in their groups, in their sphere of influence. And I further want to thank my friends Mike Fox, Dan O'Neill, Dr. Bill Hunnigan, and Danette Abbott. Oh boy, Widner, and because without your help, this program would not have happened as well as it did. And then finally, to all our presenters, you guys are awesome. And to everybody who showed up here, you are the groundswell of what's going to move this forward. And what you learned here today, you can take forward and you can start sharing and chat about it in the different Zoom meetings that you go to. We don't get to stand around the water cooler anymore and talk about politics in sports. So we have to go to Zoom meetings and maybe the grocery line when we're all 6 feet apart. But you know, this is a topic whose time is now. And if we don't do this, we're not going to have the doctors and the nurses and the other healthcare professionals, X-ray techs such as myself, I'm an X-ray tech, trained to take care of the next generation and the next pandemic, because everybody's aging out in healthcare. And it's the same thing in teaching. Our teachers are aging out, and we need to bring in the next generation of teachers. And if we don't take care of our education programs, then we're not going to have teachers, and we're not going to have plumbers, and we're not going to have a lot of the other paraprofessionals, electricians and so forth that go through trade schools. So these are all interrelated and combined together. So let's make sure that we have a future in America, so we don't have to import technical expertise from around the world because we can't create it on our own. Last thought, Mike Fowler, please.
Oh, I'm just thrilled, as I usually am after these things. I am a parent that paid for 3 kids to go through college here in California, 2 of them at the same time. It was the poorest we've ever been. And I hope that that comes to an end. In fact, my 3 children have children of their own that are about to go to college, and I would love to see them not have problems paying for it. So thanks everybody for being here. It was a great meeting, and it will be available on YouTube tomorrow sometime. Look for the PDA-CA YouTube channel, and you'll find this. So,
and Mike, please send it to me, and I'll edit out the blips and make it clean, and then share it with more people too.
Okay, very good. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.